Hi everyone, this is the behind the scenes of how I made my Sweet Dreams video in Unreal 5. I wanted to check out Unreal 5 and actually make something that touched upon a lot of the new features in the engine, which include Nanite, Lumen, the modeling tools, and I touch upon some new Niagara stuff, chaos, Quixel bridges included in it as well, which is super awesome for building things. So if you want to see how I made my video, stick around. And I do apologize for my very clicky-clacky keyboard that makes its debut through most of this. But hopefully there's something in this video that you like and you learn something from. Thanks. Okay, so the first thing that I like to do is go check my project settings when I'm starting a new project. Especially around the rendering section. Lumen is going to be new in Unreal 5. So I just want to kind of just go see what settings are set by default and if there's any options that I have to turn certain settings on. So my GI method is going to be Lumen, my reflection method is going to be Lumen, and if you have a more powerful computer, you can turn on hardware ray tracing. I have turned that on, which then turns on this additional ray lighting mode setting. So if you turn this off, you can see this is grayed out. If you turn that on, you can set this, and I switched mine to hit lighting for reflections. I know there's a balance of if maybe you're in games, you don't want to turn on some of these additional settings, but since I'm making linear content, I do kind of want the best shadows and the best reflections and the best GI that I can get. So I usually tend to go for the settings that come at a little greater cost, but help out during renders. So I'm going to turn on hit lighting for reflections. And then if you are using software ray tracing, you do have two settings here. Either global tracing or detail tracing. Again, it's kind of finding that balance of what your project is on which one you want to use. And then the other setting that I did change was under the shadow map method. I didn't actually change this until halfway through the project when I started rendering, and I did notice the shadows on my character were looking a little different, and when I looked into it, I realized that it was these virtual shadow maps that were on by default. So I actually went and switched this back to just regular shadow maps for my settings. Besides the project settings, I do also like to go through my plugins. Depending on like what starter project you pick, you might have certain plugins enabled by default already. The ones that I do turn on because I use the LiveLink Face app to drive Mitzy in real time is I always make sure LiveLink is turned on, this one here, and the Apple AR kit with the face support. So both of these need to be turned on so I can actually stream my face across and Unreal can pick that up. The other ones that are in this video that I'm going to use is if we look up chaos, I am using chaos caching later on, and you will want to make sure that's turned on as well. And I think at this point, movie render queue is turned on by default already, but if you are rendering stuff out, you're going to want to make sure movie render queue is turned on. So those are the plugins and project settings that I always kind of click through. And of course, sometimes as I'm working, I realize that maybe there's a new plugin that I need to turn on or a project setting that I missed. So if any of those come up while I'm going through this, we will revisit and call those out in the video. The next thing I like to set up is a simple light rig. So as I'm building my world and my environment, I have some lighting that I know plays well with the characters and the environment that I'm building. So we're going to start here and we're going to make a new level. I'm going to just make an empty level as well. And I'm actually going to dock my actors panel so it's kind of easy to drag and drop stuff across. And we're going to go to the lighting section and we're going to pull out a skylight, a directional light to begin with. And then just because I can't really see the effects of lighting without anything in there. I do like to kind of drag out a plane and a cube just so I can kind of see what's going on. So we're gonna make that a little bit bigger. We're gonna drop a cube in here. And let's go to the skylight. I always switch it to a cube map, and usually I just pick some sort of daytime map in here, and the intensity looks good. We're gonna go now to the directional light. We're gonna set this as movable, and the order of the settings did change a little bit in Unreal 5. The intensity used to be the first thing kind of up here, but it is now down here next to the light color. So I'm gonna drop that down a bit to 1.5. And there's also, using Lumen, there are a couple more light settings that you have to be mindful of. If you're used to using ray tracing, it was pretty simple in terms of just turning it on and everything kind of worked. But there is a couple more settings around the shadows now. So if we go down, the first thing that I changed was the number of dynamic shadow cascades. So I set that to 10. And again, these settings might tweak a little bit as we go through the video and we get really to the lighting section. I might kind of revisit and go and adjust these a little bit more. But I just wanted to call out some of the ones that I default set up. So that's the first one. And then I did set the shadow filter sharpen so I can get some sharp shadows in there as well as you move far and near your assets. So we have that. The next thing I do like to add is a sky. So let's go grab the sky atmosphere. I'm gonna actually go through and just put these all at the origin so it's nice and clean. And we also add a, not hog, a height hog. I was combining those together. So we're going to drop that in, put that at the origin. We are going to turn on volumetric fog. And again, these are going to change once I get into how I did my lighting, especially the nighttime one was very fog heavy. But for now, we're just going to drop this in here. I do like to change the color to kind of something a little brighter and more colorful. So we're going to do that, and let's save this. It looks like I did one already, so we're going to just call this light rig. And that way I can drop this in to different sublevels as I'm working, and I can kind of have some balanced lighting. Let's put Mitzy out here just to make sure she's looking okay. And she looks good there. Let's just hit save. And the last thing I do like to do, so here's another example of a project setting. I do like to make sure the auto exposure is turned off. If you have that on, sometimes as you're zooming the camera in and out, you'll kind of see the lighting trying to balance itself. So let's make sure auto exposure is turned off. So what we're seeing in the viewport there's no funny business going on. And we're additionally going to add a post-process volume here and put that at the origin, and we're going to search for unbound. And that means that this volume will encompass the entire world. Otherwise, it will just encompass whatever this cube is around. So as your camera goes into it, you'll see the effects of it changing. And since, again, Lumen is new, I did want to go through and just kind of familiarize myself with any new settings in here. So I like to toggle these on so I know this is something that I'm using or that I've set very intentionally, kind of highlight it as well. When we get to the rendering section, I will kind of go through these. I did end up bumping up the quality of these a lot, and I believe the max trace distance. So for now, this is fine. Once I started rendering and I started seeing, maybe things weren't that high quality or my shadows were kind of disappearing at a distance, I did end up bumping these up, but this should work for now. I always suggest kind of start at the basics, and as you see things come up, then you can kind of debug and figure out, what settings to adjust and what magic toggle fixes the issues that you are seeing. So I'm also going to, again, turn on reflections. Same thing, I think I bumped up the quality later on for this as well. And those are the only two. So I'm not going to really change anything in here until later on. Exposure is fine. We turned off auto exposure, so we shouldn't see that adjusting. I will go into some bloom adjustments and lens flares as well, since I made some little custom lens flares, just like a star shape that I could pass in. In this next section, we are going to start building the landscape. I had an idea that I wanted this giant landscape covered with all of these cupcakes. So what we're going to do is, since we built this light rig here, I'm actually going to remove the plane and the cube and Mitzy so I can use this light rig in a bunch of different worlds as I'm building and exploring things like that. So we've cleaned this up. The only things left are the lights, the fog, and the post-process volume. And we are actually going to make a new level. It's going to be an empty level. And we're going to drag that light rig as a sublevel. And actually, you're going to make sure you're clicked on the levels tab before you do that. And go ahead and drag that there. I'm going to right click and change this to always loaded. The default setting is blueprint loaded, which means it's expecting either blueprint or your sequencer to tell the sublevel when to load. But in this case, I always want my light rig there. If you don't switch that, or you don't have something controlling your light rig or the sublevel, it won't actually render. So I always just set that by default, double click back on the persistent level. And what we're going to do is we're going to switch to landscape mode. And we are actually going to start setting up what we need to build our landscape. I do leave these as the default settings. They worked for me, so we'll do that. And then once you do that, you do have some sculpting tools here. So I just used the default sculpt. I made, I think, my tool strength a little stronger, the brush size. And you can kind of just start sculpting. And if your world is massive and it's moving a little slow, you can bump up your camera speed so you can fly around a bit faster. And you can go ahead and do that. Let's make my brush size a little bit smaller. And we're going to kind of have some big mountains and some small little hills around here, but we're going to have this open space where Mitzy can run around. And do that. Ooh, that's really big. You can, if you're sculpting and you're kind of getting some shapes that look a bit rough, you can switch to the smooth tool and kind of smooth some of these out a bit. So that's kind of what I did to get my landscape set up. Let's give this a save. Let's save over this landscape level here. Okay, so you can continue going through that. The landscape feature has been in Unreal for a while, so I'm not going to spend any more time on that, so I can get into more of the new features, which leads me to adding some materials. Now I'm going to switch back to kind of the default mode. And if you hit this little drop down here, you're going to see that there's a Quixel Bridge option. So I'm going to launch that. And this will actually let you bring in materials and assets all inside of the editor. So I'm logged in already. You will need to log in before you start using this. So I'm going to dock this down here. And let's go browse for some materials for our landscape. So I want some sort of ground, floor, nature. So I went into the sand section and I ended up using this one here because it was kind of fun. It reminded me a little bit of cheese or the moon. But just so you can see the process, I will go pick a new one and bring that in. So let's do this one. If you click on it, you'll get a little bit close up of it that you can kind of go through the images. you can download it here and then add it to your project. You can also select it here and drag it out to your world, and it will actually kick off the download for you. So you can see if we get close to this, it's like a little shader ball. And it has kind of like a little preview of what your material is going to be. And we'll wait for that to finish downloading. And if we go to our world outliner here and we kind of pull this up, then we should be able to search for this material in our content browser, and you can see it dumps it in this Megascans surfaces folder, and here's all the textures, and here is our material. So it's so fast to kind of browse through here and just grab what you want. Oh, these are kind of fun. I didn't see these ones before. And drag it out to your world to really build something really fast. And same thing for 3D assets. You can kind of go through here. Let's go through food. Let's grab, we'll do the pear. Same thing, you can drag it out and it will kick off the download for you. And oops. And then once that's done, you can also, again, just navigate to that, and now you have your pear. So it's really fast to build environments, bring different shaders in and things like that. So let's delete our pear and let's go back to our surface that we added in. And I'm going to delete the sphere here. I love editing these materials a bit more. So I always make an additional instance of it. So I have the original in case I want to go back to it. And let's drop this on our landscape. And we need to go here and do landscape material. And let's open this up. And you can see, so this will be a little hard to get all in a screen share, but you can see here is the material, and you do have all these different settings. So let's play with the tiling because it is looking a bit repetitive. So I always kind of just like to, go up to 10. That looks like it's making things smaller. And let's go down to 0.1 and 0.1. And that seems a bit intense, but let's put Mitzy next to it so I can really see what that looks like. All right, so that is a bit big next to her. Let's go maybe to 0.5 and 0.5 and slow down my camera a little bit. That could be kind of fun. We could maybe even do 0.7, 0.7. Okay. And I obviously love playing with the colors. So in my video, green, I do have a daytime and a nighttime of the world, and I actually had different colors on the ground. So during the day, I do have a green color that I kind of picked to kind of look like, I don't know, grass. And then the nighttime one, since everything's really pink and purple, I had kind of like a purple color, but you can go through and set whatever color you want. So it's really cool that you can kind of then tweak these materials a bit further for what you're trying to do. So let's leave that as purple and save that. So it's super, super cool that you can just like have all these assets to use and build your world a lot faster. You don't have to go download them separately and have all these other applications open. It's all just in one. Here we have my landscape that I finished and our light rig. And because this is pretty huge, the fog is actually kind of covering some of this. So before I continue on, I'm going to click on my height fog and I'm going to adjust the start distance and try to just push that off of my landscape so I'm not having that blue covering. Again, that might change a little bit once I get to the lighting, but my next piece I'm going to work on is actually adding all of my cupcakes to this landscape. So let's actually import this cupcake. This cupcake is just from a marketplace, so it is not optimized by any means. When you import the cupcake in, you will have this build Nanite option, and you can toggle that on. I'm actually gonna leave it off so I can show you how to enable it once an asset's actually in the project. Other than that, all of these settings are fine for this, and let's hit import. And here is my cupcake. And you can see it is 109,000 triangles for this tiny little cupcake here. And that's a lot, especially if I want this all over this environment. So what you can do is you can also right click on it, go to Nanite and hit enable. And let's double click on this again, and you can see that it shows that it's enabled here. So let's go ahead and save that. And I'm going to drag this tiny little cupcake out. Let's scale this up so we can see it a bit better. Maybe even bigger than that. So there is our cupcake. Now, in the next section, we are actually going to set this up as foliage so I can paint it across this entire landscape and see how many of these we can have. So let's go and do that. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is start painting these cupcakes. So I'm gonna switch to foliage mode, and I do have my cupcake saved here already, but I will show you how to actually set that up. So you can drag your static mesh into this foliage section here, and it'll prompt you on where you want to save this foliage type. So I'll just save it in this tutorial folder that I've made, and you can see it made this asset here. Then it will auto select it as something that can be paintable, and let's go like this. And so you can see a little bit more of these details here. It's going to show you your mesh if you want to override different materials, which I actually do with this cupcake. I'll show you that after I kind of go through these settings. The density for your brush, how many instances are going to kind of get painted. The radius, if you need to kind of space them out, you can increase this value here. If you want to add some scaling variety for the cupcakes, so if you want them at different sizes, you can set that up. And then if you want them to align to the normal as you're painting, and if you want some kind of additional rotations around them and things like that. Also, if you're painting on a slope, you might need to increase this value as well. So let me go, oops, looks like I accidentally clicked. Let me undo that. I'm going to turn this one off, and let's go to my cupcake that I previously imported and run through those settings. So I am overriding a material for the cupcake. I think that's like the cake part. And then I do have them spaced out a bit so they don't kind of clip into each other too much. I have a range of scale on them as well, so 25 to 45 units, so I get a little bit of variety in there. I do have them aligned to the normal, and I do have this ground slope going up to 180s because up here gets kind of pretty high of an angle to paint on, so if you don't have that, it might not let you paint up here. So I have those set. And then you can click on paint, so you can start painting. And if you click, you can see that it's just spawned a bunch, and I'll just kind of start going and kind of painting around. If you want to see if Nanite is working, you can click on lit up here and go to Nanite visualization and go to overview, and you should see your asset, in this case my cupcakes. You should see them broken down into their triangles and their clusters, and you can see that Nanite is working on those instances. So we'll go back here, and I will kind of continue to paint them. My world had a couple, I added some trees and lollipops and balloons and things like that. So as you enable these different ones, if you want to kind of paint them all together, if you have multiple enabled, then they'll kind of all spawn together like that. And let me undo. If you just want the trees, then you can just have the trees enabled, and it will just spawn those few like that as a little cluster. So I did kind of a mix of those. I did the cupcakes first, and then I went through and added some trees, some lollipops, these little blades of grass, daisies. Oops, one under there. And let's see, maybe, oh, this radius is pretty big. Let's undo that. Let's see if that brings them closer. And all right, that's super dense, but you can see that you can kind of tweak your density and your radius until you kind of get something that you are happy with, and you can kind of paint those around. So I will undo that and continue to just kind of paint my cupcakes in first. I kind of want it to feel super full, but I also kind of want to have some areas that Mitzy can run through, and there's kind of cupcakes all around her. And then again, if you want to adjust the sizes even further, you can increase that and get kind of some other variations in there. So I will show you what this looks like after I've finished painting all my cupcakes and trees and lollipops. We should see kind of the starting of the environment that I will use in my video. And here is the completed environment. You can see if I pull out, we have our landscape piece here. I built a couple of hills and mountains. Went and painted all of these cupcakes, trees, lollipops, a couple balloons placed, and then I have these little grass daisy plants that I put. So let's go to foliage mode so I can show you all of them in here. So not an insane amount of cupcakes, 2,200 of them. So I definitely could have pushed it further, but I kind of got what I needed out of it. Again, not too many trees or these grass pieces. Now, all of these assets do have Nanite enabled. So if we go here, you can see, let me just go to the triangles one so it is bigger. You can see the lollipop, the balloons, the trees, and the little grass twisties also have Nanite enabled. So it's definitely running really fast, really smooth. There would be no way my computer could handle this otherwise. So this is awesome. Let me go here and we can go look at the assets themselves. So let's see what's in here. I have this little marshmallow flower, which is not too dense. We have the little grass twisty, and then let's see, the lollipop's down here. Let's go find the lollipop and the tree. We have the tree, so about 21,000, oh sorry, 40,000 triangles for the tree. And let's go look at the balloons. The balloons are at around 34,000 triangles. So I feel like it's a pretty solid scene. Definitely the heaviest out of any of my Mitzy environments that I've built before. So her workshop. I'll get those numbers actually and put them down below so we can compare that. So this is my world that I have here. I have my light rig, I have my fog, and I have everything painted in. And from here, this is kind of what I built first. And then I started kind of working on my shots, kind of what was the story that I wanted to tell, which I kind of made up as I was going. I knew I wanted a world filled with cupcakes. I knew I wanted Mitzy kind of running through it. But I didn't quite have any idea of, about the cupcake exploding and going from kind of this dark, mysterious world, having that cupcake kind of explode, and then all of a sudden it's daylight and it's happy. So this is kind of where I started. And I will then kind of go through, I have my daytime light rig. I'll show you my nighttime one, which I have them both loaded here. And you can see here's kind of the purple, dark, hazy one. This area is there's a lot of shots kind of in this area. I've cranked some spotlights with some bright pink lights to kind of get that more kind of cool effect going on. So again, this is just adjusting my lights and adjusting my fog color to get this nighttime version. And then let me switch back to here. Then I kind of started kind of shot scouting around to kind of see, okay, was there any areas where there was kind of some cupcakes laid out, that there was some space for her to run through. And I knew I was going to do kind of a little bit of shot specific lighting. So this is kind of just my world lighting. I did add more lights in for all of the shots. But I kind of just started exploring, and I kind of like the different silhouettes that I was seeing, kind of how the shadows kind of look, the trees look cut out like this. I have some giant cupcakes in the background. So this was kind of my next step. And I will, in the next section, we're going to go over how I kind of organized my shots and started laying them out, and kind of just started playing with lights and cameras and some animation. In this section, I'm going to show you how I organized all of my shots and started kind of building those out. So I do have this master sequence here, and you can see all of my shots are laid out in here. And I like doing this. This kind of gives me like a rough edit of what my video is going to look like at the end. I do still render and edit it out in another piece of software, but I do like kind of timing my shots out. I can move shots around and see how everything looks live in the engine. So I can double click in one of these, and you can see I have my camera in here, and I have Mitzy and the animation that is on her, and I can make edits to this. So let's make a new shot from scratch. So let's go to my tutorial folder, and I'm going to right click, go to animation, make a new level sequence. We'll call this tutorial shot. Open that up. I'm going to switch this to 24 FPS. And by default, I always just hit this little camera icon and makes a camera cuts track for me. And it spawns a cine camera, which is exactly what I need to start with. And let's go find Mitzy. I'm going to, if you click on the camera here, you will be piloting it. You want to hit the eject button so you can just fly around outside of the camera. And I've clicked on Mitzy, and I pressed F on my keyboard to go find where she is at. So let's look through. Oh, pop back over here. Let's press F again while looking through the camera so I can find where we are in this giant world. And I'm just going to go to unlit really quick so I can find her faster. There she is. Okay. So let's just say we do want this to be our shot. If you want to move her around, you can, again, drag her. Let me slow down my camera a bit. Let's actually go put her over by some of these cupcakes. Oh, too slow. I'm going to eject from my camera, and then I'll just go find her again. And let's go put her here. Okay. Let's let's maybe put her on a cupcake or something like that. There she is. And then I'm gonna pull this up and I'm going to drag Mitzy to my track so I can add some animation to her. And let's just pick this dancing one. And let's move her up a bit. And she's just dancing on the edge of this cupcake. That. And I can scrub and I can see her dancing. I'm going to drag this so it loops. I'm not sure how long I want this shot to be yet. I do have this star wand attached to her by default in Marbled Outliner, so that's why it's kind of coming with her and kind of attached to her hand already. And one thing I do love is that emissive materials now actually emit light, which is super awesome. I love that that kind of gives a little bit of light as well, and I don't need to necessarily attach a point light or something to give that effect. So let's go look back through my camera. I'm going to press F again to kind of jump me there and kind of line that up, adjust my lens, and I'll click on my cine camera. And I always like turning on my focus plane, and then I will usually kind of pick Mitzy and then adjust from where I need. And that seems good. She is a bit dark, so what I've been doing is, because I organize them in shots, I can either do overrides on my lights or I can just add like a spawnable spotlight, which is usually what I've been doing for kind of some character lighting. So to do that, I'm going to click back on my Place Actors tab that I've got put here, click on the spotlight and drag a spotlight out. Now it can be kind of hard to move this around, especially if you go off screen while in the context of your shot. So I like to click this and go to layouts and work in 2 panes. It lets me have one in the context of the shot, and then one that I can navigate around. So now I can grab this light and actually move it around. I'm going to set it to movable so I don't have this preview. Let's lower the intensity. Maybe put a little pink. Let me put a little bit pink. Make it a little bit more intense. And there you go. And then once I've kind of positioned that, I will drag this spotlight to the shot, right click on it and do convert to spawnable. That way I don't have to worry about lights being in other shots and then moving them around, and maybe I forget to key something. So I like to do that just kind of for these kind of like character overrides. So I'm gonna save that. I also like to key my camera settings because sometimes I might like accidentally enable, like look through the cine camera and then I'm flying around and now I've changed my camera. So I'm just gonna key these all, especially the transform, so I don't accidentally do that. And here we have this shot. And then what we're gonna do is let's go add this to our master sequence. So I'm gonna go back into content, cinematics, go in here, open up our master, and then what I can do, I can click these, maybe I wanna drag them over, and I will add a shot, and I think we call this tutorial shot. And let's look through here. So you can see she jumps down, and then we have her dancing on a cupcake. And I'll kind of continue going through and making different shots. And it was kind of like an iterative process. I'd make a shot, maybe I'd have an idea for something. I would go make my exploding cupcake, come back. Maybe I needed to make a Niagara effect or model something. So it was kind of really a back and forth. I didn't have all the shots planned in my head before, which is really fun. I kind of like that process. And if we go back into the shot, another cool thing is if we go to Mitzy, you can add a control rig on top of it. I do have one that's made for Mitzy. I am not a rigger by trade, so it is fairly basic. But if you don't have a control rig built, you can add just this FK one. So if there's like little things that you maybe just want to tweak or adjust, It can be super handy. By default, it'll then kind of pop on top of, it'll kind of override the animation. But what you can do is if you right click on it and switch it to additive, then it's actually has your animation and then you're adding on top of it. So let me unhook from the camera. And then what you could go in and do, let's drop this down so you can see all the joints. You can also see the blend shapes as well. So if you wanted to maybe curl her fingers or something like that, you could click on these and, you know, maybe make it look like she's actually holding the wand a little bit better. And then you could key that and go through this. So again, if you don't have the skills or you don't have the time to set up a control rig, this could be a really quick way for you to kind of just adjust some animation that you have. So it is a little bit more of a process, right? You can only move kind of individual joints and things like that, whereas a control rig would let you control kind of the whole arm, the whole leg, things like that. But this is a really quick way to add some extra things. And let's go see the blend shapes. And let's see what we have. Eyes, brows, mouth frown. Let's see if we can. So you can, so for the blend shapes, because it goes from 0 to 1, you can kind of play with them here to see what it'll do. And then you can kind of key that as well. I think she has a tongue out one, so she can stick her tongue out. Obviously, that's way past the value of 1 of what it should be, but that's kind of funny. Let's see. Try to see which one her eye open is. Blink right. There you go. So maybe if I wanted her eyes open instead, I could do that. And that's kind of cool. You can see all the keys hold for all of the animation. So that's a really fun feature. It definitely is like a really quick way to tweak something, especially if it's just one little joint that's off and you're like, oh, I wish I could move that. That's been super helpful as well. So let's just go back and save this and look through our camera and press G. Oh, never mind. Press G will hide the UI stuff, but these will still be here. I think you can toggle some of the stuff on and off here. Let's see. There you go. Hide control shapes. You can do that, and you'll notice also when we added this FK rig, it actually switched to this animation mode here. And there you go. In this section, I'm going to go over my post-process volume settings and show you some example shots and what I tweaked and why I tweaked them. If you don't have a post-process in your world already, from the Place Actors tab, you can search for it, drag it out, and then go ahead and set it to unbound in the detail section. So you want to turn that on right there. And I already have one, so I'm actually going to delete that and click back on mine. And we'll start from the top. And the first setting that I changed was the bloom. By default, it's set to standard. And if you kind of look at this area here, you can see it changing between convolution and standard. I actually had never used convolution before. I know it's been there, but I wanted to give it a try, as it seems like it's more expensive, but if you're doing more cinematic kind of stuff, it is a nicer kind of effect. So I'll just crank the intensity so you can see it a little bit more. So I did change that when you switch to convolution. The settings and adjustments for it are down here. I didn't really change much besides what's already in the default. Then the next setting that I changed was the lens flare. So let me go to a different shot. And you can see the lens flare here. And if I click back on the post process, you can see I actually plugged in my own shape. By default, it's kind of like this hexagon type of shape for the lens flares. So that would be fun to have a little star that kind of mimics the star wand that Mitzy has. And I adjusted kind of the intensity and the size of it. So you can see if I reset this, it gets kind of this shape. And then I can plug this back in and it turns to a star. So I thought that was like a fun little touch to add as she's running around in this world. And then in my shots, I can actually kind of animate the lens flare if I need to, just because sometimes it might be a little distracting throughout the shot. So in this example, I have it kind of set to 1. You can see the intensities here and I've keyed it. And kind of at that moment where it starts flying off, I crank up the intensity to 4 and then I kill it again so it goes away. So it's kind of fun to animate it, especially if it's a little distracting in some areas. So that was the lens flare. And then other than that, once we get under our kind of rendering section, my GI method is set to Lumen. I did crank up the quality setting and the final gather quality, again, just because I was rendering, I wanted everything to look really nice. So I believe by default, those are set to 1. So I just cranked it up to 2. And then I did increase this max trace distance. So let me go to another shot and show you why I did that. Here, and I'm going to switch to our daylight rig. And here's the shot. And if I reset this to the default, you can kind of see all of this got super bright. And let me put that value back. And when it was initially this, as I kind of had this wide shot and my camera was kind of panning in and out, I couldn't tell what was happening because I could still see shadows on things. So I finally went into the Lumen overview to kind of see like, okay, is there anything like in here that I can see to kind of figure out what's happening? And you can see this surface cache version is kind of 1-to-1 with where I'm seeing kind of like this haze happening. And then I was kind of reading online about it and realized that this was the value that I needed to increase so that I could have Lumen affecting kind of things further away. And again, I'm not, because I'm doing animation and I'm rendering this out, I'm not totally concerned with the GPU cost. I do have a graphics card that can render it. And again, I'm not doing too many crazy things. So I was able to increase this, and then you can see this view here, then everything is kind of being shown. So let's put this back again. So sorry, this is the reflection view. So that actually took me a while to figure out what was happening, because again, like once if your camera is moving in and out, you'll see it kind of fading and it was really distracting. So I did change that. I'll probably leave that on for most parts. And then again, reflections are set to Lumen, as well as I did increase the quality. And in my project settings previously, I showed you that I did set this to hit lighting. Again, there's settings in the project settings that you can turn on based off of the kind of machine that you have. If you want kind of better reflections and things like that. If your machine can't support that, then again, you can switch to surface cache, or you can just leave it as the project default and have the project drive it. So it's nice that you can, again, override those in the post-process volume depending on what you are doing. So I'm going to leave it as that, and I'm pretty sure that's what I have set as the project setting as well. And then I didn't adjust anything else in here. I left the motion blur. Sorry. I did change the motion blur. I set my target FPS to 24. And then depending on some of the shots, I had it on or off. You can key this amount, which is actually really nice as well. And that is it in terms of my post-process settings. In this next section, I'm going to show you how I used Chaos to explode this cupcake and then use the cache manager to record my explosion so I can add it back into my shot and play it. So you can see my cache is added here. I have this start time attribute that I can key, and if I scrub through, you can see it exploding, and if I stop moving, you can see that it holds on that frame. Okay, so I went ahead and made a new empty default level, and I've added my static mesh cupcake, and I did scale it up by 100 units just so it is this giant exploding cupcake. Then we're going to switch to fracture, and we're going to hit new to make a new geometry collection, and I'll pick this folder to save it in. And then after that, you can pick your different fracture types. I'm just touching on very few settings inside of Chaos. I'm sure there's a ton that you can dive into and keep kind of tweaking these, but this is what I just did for the video. I'm going to click on uniform, and you'll kind of get a preview of how it's going to break this geo apart. And then over in the settings, I'm going to set my explode amount to 1, and then I left everything else as is. I always like to kind of just see the default behavior and then kind of tweak upon that, since this is something that's new for me. And let's hit fracture. All right, and there is our exploded cupcake. So for the sake of this example, this looks good to me. What you can do is we can actually simulate this so you can see it kind of falling down and exploding. So let's click on here and let's move it high up. And I'm going to hit play, and we should see the cupcake fall down and again kind of fracture into what we see now. And there we go, and it's all going to break apart. Okay. Now that we're happy with our fracture, I'm going to show you how you can actually record this so you can play it back in your sequence. So what we're going to do is, let's go back just to our regular selection mode. We're going to go to Actor, Chaos, and Create Cache Manager. And I'll also save this in the tutorial folder. Let's call this Cache Manager. Save that, and if you switch back to your world outliner, you can see that it's been added here. And now all you have to do is hit play again, and it's going to cache out whatever happens to your asset. So let's hit play. It'll fall, it'll break apart. We'll have some pieces kind of bouncing and stumbling around. And then let's hit stop. Okay. And then to preview that this worked correctly, let's go here. Just gonna give these a quick save. And I'm going to make a level sequence to add this cache in just to play it back, make sure it's correct. I'm gonna right click, go to animation, go to level sequence, double click that, and then add my cache manager here. And there's this start time attribute. And you can see that it kind of popped it back to its starting point. So let's see, let's pick like 10. Okay, so you can kind of put some different values in to kind of see where it's at and decide where you want to key it. So if you want it kind of starting down here, you can do that. If you want it from up there, let's add a key. Let's go here and set it to 10. And then as you scrub through, you can see that it is playing back your animation, and that's way faster than I recorded. So you can kind of adjust this for whatever you need. And that is it. So then I can save this out and I can use it in any of my other shots. Okay, here we are back in our level, and what you can do is just grab that cache manager and drag it out, and you can see there is our cupcake. And again, you can open up your shot, add that cache manager in, set that start time, or just set it at a certain frame, and you can get your animation coming through. And that. And you can scrub and you can see that. So you can place it wherever you want in the world. And that's how your animation can come through. In this next section, I'm going to show you a little bit about the modeling tools. I used it to model the Unreal logo at the very end. So what I did first was I grabbed a logo or an image that I wanted to model from the internet and I brought it into my project, and I made a simple material where I'm plugging that in as an opacity mask. I'm going to drag a plane out here. Let me scale this up to 20, drop my material so I have kind of what I want to model here as reference. And then I'm going to go into top mode. So I guess I could have rotated it that way. Guess I didn't need to rotate it. Okay, so we have this. I'll probably actually just scale this up a bit more. And then let's hit G to clear up the viewport. And let's go into our modeling section here. And I am not a modeler by any means, so this will probably be a fast, dirty way of modeling something. Again, lots of tools in here. If you do have a modeling background, probably super interesting to dive in and see everything that they've built. So I will preface that. So I used this poly extrude, and what I did is, let's go here, I literally zoomed in and kind of just went and did all these points. Now, the logo at that, the reason why I can kind of do it this way is because essentially I'm just using it to spawn additional meshes on top of, so you're not actually going to see all these fine little details because there's going to be all these cupcakes kind of spawned all over it. So for me, this worked. And let's go here. And there's some settings, like if you want to turn off snapping, you can do that. But just to get something done fairly quickly, this worked pretty well for me. And I'm using my middle mouse to kind of zoom in and out, and then right mouse button down, oops, to kind of pan around that. Okay, so once those hook back up, I'm going to switch back to perspective so I can actually see kind of how thick this is going to be. So I'm going to be happy there. And we'll hit complete. And here is my little Unreal logo. You can just move that around. And it's now like a normal asset. And if you're curious on where it saves it, you can always click on this little browse button and you'll notice that there's this generated folder that gets made. Here's my previous ones that I did, and it saves it here for you. And, you know, not too bad for maybe a minute or two, just enough to kind of spawn my cupcakes off of. Again, there's other There's other tools as well through here. So if you wanted to deform it further, if you wanted to simplify it, things like that, auto UV it, lots of options in here. So let's just do auto UV and see what happens. Let's wait for that to finish. And again, so you can see there's some settings in here that you can play with. And once you're happy with that, you can hit accept. And then you'll have some UVs. Again, if you are a modeler or surfacer, you can probably spend a lot more time doing this than I did. Again, I was just using this to have some geo to spawn cupcakes off of. This is actually technically invisible under the hood for what I need to do, so it doesn't really matter. And yeah, that's it for modeling tools. I think it's super awesome that this is integrated into the engine. Again, like if you are someone who can model, it's probably really quick to kind of prototype some stuff out, get an idea, do some blocking, and then continue to kind of fine tune that as well. And then you also have bridge in here so you can model stuff, drop some materials on whatever you're modeling, and it's definitely such a faster workflow being all in one application. In the previous section, we modeled the Unreal logo, and I'm going to show you what I actually ended up doing with that. Is I made the logo out of cupcakes, and they all kind of fly everywhere. So let me play this, and we can check it out. All right, so we're gonna go and make this cupcake logo, which is actually pretty straightforward. What we're gonna do is you're gonna right click and make a new Niagara system, and you're gonna pick new system from selected emitters. And I use this one as a starting point. I always like using them as a starting point because it gives me some options in there, some toggles to play with. Again, I'm not a pro at building effects, so I like to have a starting point and kind of just see what all the different modules do and if I can get the effect that I'm looking for. So we're gonna hit this plus sign, let's hit finish. Let's call this cupcake. And this is just kind of some particles exploding everywhere. So the first thing, let's pause this, that I did is I turned off the sprite render, and we're actually going to add a mesh render, and we are going to plug in our cupcake. And if you drop this down here, you can scale it as well. So they're pretty small. I think I ended up setting this to around 4. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to turn off some of these forces until we have it on the logo, and then kind of decide if I want to add those back on. And then what we're going to do is under the spawn, you're going to search for sample static mesh, and we're going to move that to the front. And this is where we're going to plug in our logo or whatever you decided to model. So we're going to do that and put these both here. And then you are going to look for another static mesh module, which is called static mesh location. And we're going to put this last. The modules kind of go in order like this. So kind of abstract, probably don't have enough particles. So let's bump this up. I think it was close to 3,000 for that. And maybe a scale of 4 is a little too big. Let's go back to the mesh render and let's do 3. Okay, that's a little better there. You can see all the cupcakes are kind of all just pointing in the same direction. So I added, if you search for orientation, you can add an initial mesh orientation here. And we'll just leave that as random. And let's get closer again. And now you can see they're all kind of pointing in different directions, which is kind of the effect that I wanted. And if we press play, we kind of just have them exploding and floating everywhere. I ended up copying this emitter and did the kind of like the outside circle. So I just changed what this was sampling from. So I think this is saved here as well. Drop that in there. And there you go. To add my cupcake effect in my shot, I dragged it out to the level first, and then I added it to my shot and converted it to spawnable. And then I added the Niagara component, and from the Niagara component, I added this system lifecycle track. And after that is added, you can right click on this and switch the age update mode to desired age, and that's what lets you kind of scrub this in the timeline, which is really helpful again if you're trying to set up a camera or action, you want to see everything happening together. So I usually use that to kind of set up my effects. The last effect I did was the smoke coming out of Mitzy's oven after she wakes up from a dream and she realized that she actually burnt the cupcakes that she was making. I wanted to check out the new fluids in Unreal. So what I did is if you actually enable the plugin content, I always like to enable plugin and engine. There's actually a lot of helpful examples and templates and example maps in here to check out. So if we go into plugins, there should be a Niagara Fluids content, templates, and then there's a couple different options here. I went into gas, 3D, systems, and there's a lot of cool ones in here. You can double click on those and check those out as, again, a starting point. Just wait for the shaders to finish. This one's really fun. But what I like to do is I actually like to copy one of these into my content folder so I can kind of explore, pick it apart, and I don't affect these ones, and I always have like a starting point that I can go back to. So, oops, let's go back to that folder. And there we go. And let's expand out my content folder. And let's drag this. So I ended up using this one. I'm going to drag this one to the tutorial folder. I'm going to do copy here. And we can go pop this open. Okay, so this is what we have as a starting point. A lot more fire than I would like for this. So I found the setting that worked for me was setting this temperature to 0. It seemed to just make it be smoke, whereas 1 made it be all fire. So I kept that at 0. That seemed to work for me. I'm not entirely sure if that's actually the right setting to be adjusting. Then the next setting that I did was I kind of wanted this like smoke from an oven, so like the smoke kind of going upwards instead of this sideways. So I did make this radius a little smaller, so it's more kind of kitchen smoke, not a whole building on fire. And then I played with the velocity, so I wanted it to kind of go up and over, so I killed the X, and I think I got this around -20 and Z at 30 to kind of have it go upwards. You can kind of rotate around and see how that works. And I think I played with the noise as well. I just really went through all of these and kind of put different values and saw what happened until I got something that I liked, just to kind of understand what all the different settings are doing. So now you can see this is kind of going up and over a bit. We play with the force again. You can see that it's kind of a little bit more chaotic and going in all different directions. So I wanted to lower that. And that's kind of getting close to what I had. Again, I suggest kind of going through the different settings, just changing numbers, see what happens, and kind of understanding, hover over and read the description of what the module's doing. And that's the best way to learn. Just kind of try and see what happens and kind of piece together everything that's going on. So after that, you can drag this just out to your level. I didn't actually set this up with a system lifecycle track in my shot because having it loop like this was fine. And let's go see if I can pull up that shot. I think it was this one. There you go. And she runs over to the cupcakes. All right, cool. Now that we've set up all of our shots, we've animated Mitzy, we've brought everything together, I'm actually going to render this out. And with my shot open, you can click this little icon and it will launch this window for you and it will drop the shot there. You can pick a render preset if you have one set up already. If you don't, you can click on that and it will have some defaults. I've already added some here. You'll have less, but then you can go through these settings and add the ones that you want. Honestly, I didn't change too much from the default ones. I'm rendering out a PNG sequence. When you click on anti-aliasing, honestly, the first time I rendered, I was cranking up my temporal samples. I was overriding my AA and I was setting it to TA. And I was actually getting some weird artifacts from that. So I was like, you know what, let me just go back and do the default settings, try out the temporal super resolution. And that actually rendered a lot nicer. So I always recommend, if you're unsure, always kind of start with what's recommended, do a render, see what artifacts are happening or what you're seeing, and then try to kind of debug from there, whether it's increasing your temporal settings, maybe there's a console variable that fixes the issue, but that's kind of usually how I like to work. So this actually gave me really good results, and these were the settings that I had. Again, camera for the shutter timing, left it as frame close. And then I don't really have too many console variables. I did crank up the depth of field quality to 4. In my project, it was set to 2 by default. If you're not sure on what is set in the project already, you can go to your output log, paste it, put a question mark, and it'll show you what it's set at. And then it'll also show you the other options and kind of what they do and what they mean. So that's super helpful for setting console variables. And if you don't know how to find certain console variables, I know it can be really overwhelming if you start just typing and, typing ray tracing, you type Lumen, there's so many. But if you type help and press enter, it will actually generate this window for you with all the console variables and what they do. So you could then kind of search and it will start filtering them out for you. And then you can kind of go through and read all the explanations. Maybe you can search for a keyword and see if there's anything there that helps you. So that's a nice little tool that they have. And I just did, default settings for this, output 1920 by 1080, set your output directory, hit accept, and then you can do render local. For For me, how I organize all of my levels, I have a lot in there. I leave them as blueprint loaded. So usually right before I render, I just switch the one that I want to always loaded. If you have levels left as blueprint loaded only and you don't have a blueprint controlling its level visibility, or you're not using a level visibility track in your sequencer, everything will not render. So you just want to make sure you've set that before you start rendering. Thank you so much for watching. I hope there's something in this video, something new that you learned. I'm really excited about all the new features. I ported Mitzy over to Unreal 5, and I'm excited to kind of, build bigger worlds, play with the new lighting system, definitely leverage more of the animation tools that have been built in there for my videos, and really kind of step up the quality of my videos that I've been making in Unreal 4.2.7, and I'm excited for 5 and all that it is going to bring. Thanks.